All right. Well, I am excited to have Essi. He is one of our TEDxAlief speakers. And my name is Edidiong Obo, and I'm excited. It's a pleasure to have you today to talk about who you are, why you're a TEDx speaker, and your story. So I'm going to kick it off by just asking you just the first question that I have, which is when people read your story, for me at least, it reminds me of a movie kind of similar to like Hotel Rwanda or Beast of Nations. Not sure if you're familiar with those movies, but I got a chance to watch them. And what I saw in those movies were young children that were recruited as soldiers in times of war. So, I mean, I can imagine that was a traumatic experience for you. So how did you find a way to deal with those images and those situations that you experienced as an adolescent?
Thank you. Great question. First of all, thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure talking to you. I actually was talking to a producer in LA, and we had the same conversation. But the only difference between my story and similarity, there is it's an outcome, and where I end up and what I do with this story, and all the trauma, all the chaos, all the things that I went through, and what I'm doing with that at this moment in North America.
Okay. So tell me, like, how did you deal with those images, those traumatic images that you experienced as a child, being recruited as a child soldier? How did you, as an adult, deal with those kind of images? I'm sure that they were still in the back of your mind, or something that had trigger points. But how did you work yourself through that?
It has been a really long process. I don't know how much you know about my story, but I've been my life combined complex trauma from a childhood, and then before age of 10, and then the war, and then refugee camp. I used to feel like I'm not white enough, black enough, good enough, to the point that I've been to like 17 treatments and to 29 detoxes. But then how I started dealing with that was I started talking about it. I remember the first time I spoke about my story to someone, all the secret that I carried for years and years. And I told someone that I don't know how did I to develop the courage to talk about it, because I thought she's going to judge me and not going to like me, and exact things happened. And I told her what I did when I was a child in a battlefield, and I shot myself, and the basically her reaction was exactly opposite of what I thought. And she gave me a hug, and we started crying together. And that was beginning of my process of recovery.
Wow, that is intense. I'll say that.
Yeah.
So I know a part of your story too, you talked about struggling with addiction. And so for me, at least this is what I see, at least, is that addiction, is a difficult disease, that's usually perceived as some form of lack of morals, or something that you could have done better, or, something to that extent, instead of looking at it as an actual medical condition, right? And so what were some of the challenges that you faced during your road to recovery? Like you mentioned, you were going through that healing process. So what were some of those challenges that you faced as you were going through that recovery, period, during your time where you were, had an addiction?
Well, it's, the thing is, we grow up with the stigma of addiction and trauma and all these things, and we put the way that we talked about it, really it wasn't, it was kind of negative and scared people. And that's why personally, that's my message right now, that it's not a moral issue. Like, it talks about in Time magazine, backed by APA, 55 to 60% of the people that suffer some kind of trauma, PTSD, end up using some kind of chemical dependency.
Right.
50%. So it's not a behavioral thing. It's not. So obviously, so there's more behind it, and that's why I had to find out and overcome.
Okay. So you mentioned PTSD, right?
Yes.
So for those who don't know what that is, can you explain what that is, and just kind of talk about how you finally realized that you did have PTSD?
Yes, good. I had in my life, I had like not just one or two or three, I had complex, multiple. But the question was, and which many people, including myself, I honestly didn't think that there's something wrong with me. I really didn't. And then there are so many people around the world that they don't necessarily have to go through the complex trauma that I have. But again, the research shows that 70% of adults, like that can be your family members, your coworker, your neighbors, 70% experience some kind of trauma, and 30% are experience complex trauma. And the thing is, we don't see it. The theme of my talk is faceless trauma, because you can't really see when you talk to me. Like, there are people that they know me for like 25 years. They have no idea about the things that I've been through and the suffering and trauma and all that. Like, after they read my book and said, oh my God. Because why? Because I was blocking, like I didn't want it. People who suffer from trauma, they don't like to come and talk about it. We like to hide it. And that's what kept me sick.
Okay, so you mentioned your book. Can you tell us a little bit about, your book? I mean, there's so much in there, I'm sure. So tell us a little bit about your book. What's the title of it? Where can we get it? And what inspired you to write the book? Obviously your story, but what made you say, you know what, I need to put my story in letter form? So tell us about that.
Yes, of course. I was speaking in meetings and in places about my story, and everybody, whoever hears my story, they come to me and say, "Oh, Essi, oh my God!" And this is, I'm talking about 10, 15 years ago, and they said, "You should write the book," but I wasn't really capable mentally, emotionally, to put it into the book. Then I started writing, and and this is my book called Shattered Soul, the true story of child soldier. And what a process. There was time that because when you write a book, you have to write and rewrite and bring memory, and by itself, there was a time that I honestly sit down on my desk and I cry and I write. So it was really, in a way, was therapeutic.
First of all, I know that writing process was, like you said, therapeutic, but also kind of, painful in a sense, just because you have to relive those experiences again as you're writing, so that people get a true picture of what you went through. So I mean, that's a level of bravery and boldness, I will say. A lot of people are not that bold to be able to write such a traumatic story. You know, you see a lot of people who are still trying to process that. So that leads me to my next question. As it relates to mental health, you know, what are some of the key things you can say helped you during your journey of finding your light and now becoming a traumatic coach or trauma coach?
The biggest thing that every time that I ask this question is come to this. As I already mentioned, the first time that I told someone regarding just one of my trauma and the relief that I get, what it took vulnerability. And what I think it is the most important aspect of recovery in any either addiction or especially in trauma is to have a safe and support from someone that you can trust and start being vulnerable. Because until I am not really vulnerable, I still have these blocks around me. And what it is, because vulnerability I used to think is a weakness. Then I thought, and then I find out after years of recovery and helping other people and talking about it in podcasts, TV stations, the things that I kept inside secret for years and years, and now I am able to come and talk about it in a radio station and in a book, and it's like vulnerability, because we all like to show something that we're not. We all that you know, we live a double life, and that's what really helped me to start being vulnerable.
Wow, that is awesome. I like to say that, like, if you want to actually get to know someone, like, you kind of have to be willing to get naked, right? And naked is a form of vulnerability, where you're allowing somebody in to actually see the things that, you know, maybe your trigger points or have caused you emotional pain, in order for you to, you know, get a full picture of that person. And oftentimes when we're not able to get naked with ourselves, then it makes it difficult for us to share the story, because like you said, those things are bottled up inside. So wow, like that is amazing. So I know from your healing process, you decided you wanted to now help others as a trauma coach. So tell us, like, what does that actually entail for those who don't know what a trauma coach does? What do you actually do? How do you help people?
In last 22 years, when I started my recovery, this is what I find out. I spoke to over 1,000 people, and I heard, because as I said, I've been to 17 treatment centers, 29 detoxes. So I started to see a pattern. And the pattern is again, being afraid to talk about because of judgment. And being afraid of what, not just other people, close family members, close friends, what they're going to think about us. And the culture that we raise, especially as a man, to come up and say, hey, you know what? I was sexually assaulted when I was 9 years old. I got beat up emotionally, mentally. I was experienced racism when I was in a refugee camp. I've been in a place that I had nothing to eat for months. The addiction. And so when I come and talk about these things to you, for example, and I start opening up about where I was or what I've been through, it gives you permission to say, oh my God. So it breaks a little that barrier, that wall, it cracks open. That you can say, oh, you know what? Now I can talk to this individual. And that's the start of the recovery.
Wow. I mean, that is awesome. I think that a lot of people can use a trauma coach in their lives, because there are a lot of situations and life circumstances that happen to people, and you know, people handle them in different ways. And so sometimes when you're not able to process those things, it ends up affecting your other relationships that you have, and just kind of like your goals and what you want to do. And so I think that your story is just phenomenal, because you were able to take a very, very traumatic experience that you had as an adolescent and turn that into, now you're helping people who have either a similar or even other traumatic situations, and help them work it through, work through that. So that is, wow, this is phenomenal, Okay, so I want to kind of go back. You mentioned that you struggled with, are you Black? Are you white? Are you this? So I want to ask you, like, what was that for you in terms of identity? Like trying to define your identity. What was that process like for you? Or first of all, have you defined it? And then if you have, what did that process look like? Because I know there are other people who struggle with identity that can also lead towards, just how they move and the decisions that they make in life.
When I was experiencing these racism in Germany, and I really had questions. I hated who I was, and as I said, I couldn't stand in my skin another minute, and I had problem with the identity. I had identity crisis, and because I was from Iran, and I hated to be Iranian. I was brown, and I wasn't white. I wasn't even Black. And I always talk about in my speech, at that time, look at my skin.
Yeah.
I had brown. She just changed a few years ago. So if you would have known me and I showed just this, you would have seen just white, yes?
Right, yeah.
It's just the skin. It does not define who I am as a human. And that's what we start to talk. And now look at my face. I have couple, and now that I talk about all in a positive way. I say, you know what? I used to think that I'm not white enough, Black enough, good enough. Today, I'm white enough, Black enough, and good enough. And that's with my skin and the way my attitude is.
That is, I think those are some great advice in regards to identity, right?
Yeah.
Because I tell people that, you are the one that would narrate your story. You define what you want to be, you don't allow other people to put their labels on you. You figure out what it is that you want to go by, identify with. And so, like you said, those things at the end of the day, they don't define the actual person, what God put inside of you, your purpose, your calling, what you're meant to do on this earth. But these are just things that, are superficial in a sense, even though people do see them. So I definitely, appreciate you saying that, especially for people who may have, issues with identity crisis in one way or the other, especially if it's culturally related or, skin, race related, anything like that. So I just, before we round up, I want to ask you about TEDxAlief. So, and just TEDx in general, what made you decide to say, you know what, I want to share my story on the TEDx platform?
Wow, it's as I said, I've been to so many TV station and podcasts and speak at the treatment center and conferences, and TEDx has a unique platform, and the message that we all the speakers, especially in TEDxAlief, that have a powerful message. And my message, I have no doubt with the life experience and then the experience that I had would impact millions. Wow. And nowhere there's no other platform that you can have a message better than being on the TEDx stage in TEDxAlief.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. So tell us, where can we find you? How can we connect? And if somebody is looking for a trauma coach in their area, what are some resources that they can, find or, look for in order to get that person in their life?
There are so many different places that you can look for. You can even ask your doctor. But if anything I can do to help, you can either essibagheri.com or donotgiveupnow.com. And I'm just building a new website, but I will, with no cost, 1 hour, I will give my time, anything I can do to help from anywhere in the world. If I can be any help, it's not about money, it's about how can I help, how can I be in service to someone else. And I believe God gave me that ability, put me through all this pain, all the challenges and pain and suffering that I went through, now is the asset. And for that, I want to spread the word of love, because it all comes to this. It's about love, compassion, generosity, and how can we be a better person.
Okay. So before we log out, what is one thing that a TEDx attendee should expect from the TEDxAlief? What is one thing they should expect?
Well, I can see. I don't want to say, but my friends, the people, they heard my story, and they know me. They said the attendees are waiting for transformation, inspiration, motivation, and finally, wow. And that's what they can expect from TEDxAlief.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you again today for spending time with me to talk about your story and tell the people who you are and what to expect at TEDxAlief. You guys have already heard, much about what he does and where you can get in contact with him, as well as resources. And I encourage you to make sure you tune in so that you can hear his wonderful story as well. We went a little bit into it, but if you want to get more of that information, you have to make sure you sign up for the event. So with that, I want to say thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and God bless.
God bless.